December 17th, 2025. We are studying Nectar Devotion, Vyavichari Bhav. This is going to be part 2. Nectar Devotion, this is chapter 31. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Vaskatyade Satarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpachubhischa Kipasundavyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namo. So this is the Bhakti Ras Amrita Sindhu, the ocean of nectar of Bhakti Ras, of the taste of Bhakti, the pleasure of Bhakti. And we are in the Southern Ocean, which discusses the 5 components of rasa, which then that gives you the key to how the Western and Northern oceans are organized. And as Srila Prabhupada says, without some mixture of these 5 ecstatic principles, one cannot relish transcendental bliss. One has to have all these 5 components in order for there to be rasa. And that's true with any kind of rasa, any kind of taste, any kind of pleasure. Vibhava, the stimulants; anubhava, the voluntary actions; sattvika bhava, involuntary actions; vyavichari or sanchari bhava, the transient disturbances, aggressive ecstasy, the various emotions, which is what we're studying today; and sthai-bhav, the basic relationship. So we are in the 4th wave of the Southern Ocean, part 2. This is chapter 31. And again, the components of rasa, we have the sthai-bhav, the basic relationship; the vibhav, anubhav, sattvika bhav, vyavichari or sanchari bhav, which we're studying today, to produce rasa, the basic relationship, which is stimulated by the vibhava, by Krishna, the devotees, and various aspects related to them, also by various emotions resulting in voluntary and involuntary expressions altogether, which gives us taste. So vyavichari bhavs are emotions, waves of emotions that enter into and agitate the ocean of the sthai-bhav. They come from the sthai-bhav, they enter into the sthai-bhav. So again, this is chapter 31 of Nectar Devotion, a summary of this chapter. There are 13 further vyavichari bhavs included in the previous 33. So they're not an additional. They don't bring you up to 46. But there are also various causes and effects of vyavichari bhavs. There are types of vyavichari bhavs, semblances of vyavichari bhavs, stages of vyavichari bhavs, and varieties of mind that affect them. So we're going to look at subsets. So a vyavichari bhav can have other emotions included inside of it. Can have other emotions included inside of it. This is actually an extremely important point, even in our ordinary life in this world. So Srila Rupa Goswami gives many, 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 many examples. We don't list them all here, but here's an example. One's desire to hide his real mentality is called avahita, or concealment, and a desire to exhibit superiority is called pride. Both of these may be classified under pretension. So those are 2 vyavichari bhavs kind of hiding under another one. Another example. One's ability to establish the correct import of a word may be called conclusiveness. And before such a conclusive determination of import, there must be thoughtful consideration. Therefore, the act of consideration is present during the establishment of a conclusion. So this is showing the relationship between certain vyavichari bhavs. And again, this is extremely important point, not only to understand transcendental rasa, but to understand our emotions in this world, to be able to deal with them as part of our sadhana or just basic getting along with other people? Okay, causes actually. Yes. All right. So causes and effects. So again, this analysis, and we'll talk about this in plenary, this analysis helps us to understand and gain detachment from our material emotions and cultivate spiritual emotions. So for sadhakas, there's a gradual shifting. Prabhupada says gradual and proportional. There's a gradual shifting from material to spiritual emotions. That's also according to Madhurya Kadambini of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So the causes and effects of Vyavichari bhavs, Sattvika bhavs, and various other actions should be understood to be similar to situations in the material world. Prabhupada says right in the preface that everything's motivated by rasa. Okay, so here's an example. Envy and malice can lead to self-disgust. So if one's feeling self-disgust, there may be envy and malice hiding there. So sleep may be hiding impatience and pondering. Change of color, which is a Sattvika bhav, and a Marsha, indignation of Vyavichari bhav, may be hiding envy and criticism. So from envy may come criticism, and from that may come indignation. These are, again, a few examples. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu has many more than we are discussing here, just giving a few examples. So, right, the Vyavichari bhav is the inner state, and Sattvika is an involuntary expression. Sorry, I somehow skipped this one. So from ferocity can come beating, which can lead to confusion and devastation. And sometimes the Vyavichari bhavs and the Sattvika bhavs have similar names. Okay, so I want to have a general discussion. First, I'm going to throw it out to all of you. How can this help us in our life to know that emotions can be inside of other emotions, or that emotions can cause other emotions or be caused by them? So one emotion can be hiding inside another, or emotions can cause other emotions. So what's the use of this in our life, even with our ordinary emotions? So I'd first like to hear your thoughts.
Hare Krishna Mataji, could you repeat the question once, please?
Okay. So we've just discussed from Srila Rupa Goswami that Vyavichari bhavs can hide other Vyavichari bhavs. So inside a Vyavichari bhav, there's other Vyavichari bhavs. And a Vyavichari bhav can lead to and cause other Vyavichari bhavs. So these are emotions, and these Vyavichari bhavs exist also in a material form. In our dealings with others, our dealings with ourselves, we're experiencing all 33 of these on a material level, as well as experiencing them on a spiritual level, which is our aspiration. So why is this a useful thing to know for us as sadhakas? Paneshwari Lakshmi.
I'm just guessing. Could it be that we could, in order to understand the motivation, there could be something else that's motivating that feeling, that's what's deeper inside, in a sense.
Yes, exactly. So, yes. Yeah. So, can you give an example?
I
A possible
I can't
example.
think of one. If I do, I'll try it.
Just try.
Well, you may be okay. Well, I'm just thinking you may be angry
Okay.
and you may hit out at somebody because of the anger. But behind that anger could be actually because you're hungry. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense. I'm
Okay.
just something that came
Yes.
to my mind.
Yes. Okay. That's an excellent, excellent example. They call it hangry, when you're angry because you're hungry. And such particularly happens with children. So I always tell parents and teachers, if a child is uncharacteristically ill-behaved, first check before you go into instructing them or correcting them. first check, are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they sick? Is something else going on? Okay, Nardarishi, your thoughts.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, I was thinking is helpful this for self-reflection and to have like to help our psychology and the way we
Mm,
behave towards things and how we progress as well to understand which way we're moving from a psychological point of view.
excellent. Could you give any specific example, perhaps?
Um, when it comes to mind, I was doing some, you're familiar with the curable
Yes,
meditation,
yes,
and sometimes like in meditating, oh, there is manifestation of pain, for example, in the body, but maybe underneath there is something that is causing that, like guilt, for example. I don't know that I can't remember right now.
excellent,
And
excellent,
so if we can understand these things, then we can look at our behavior and what we're going to do.
excellent, excellent. Uh, Ekan, Ek, Ekanishta Vasuda made an interesting point here that in the chat, so that we are able to find the source of our bhava, which could be related to the service we would be performing. I like this. So this is on a spiritual level. So if I look at, what's motivating me spiritually, I can see what's under that, what's under that, what's under that, what's causing that, what's being caused by that, which could then help me determine what service I should be doing for Krishna externally in this world. And also, once I start realizing my Staibhav, what eternal service I could be doing. I really like that. Very nice. Prema Prakash Haridas Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Mataji. If we have to, when we are learning and when we are describing theoretically, we are choosing individual bhavas and defining them. When we define them, we restrict their spread. In reality, when the bhavas are felt, there isn't going to be that kind of a restriction and only flow in one direction. There will be flow in multiple directions, and so there are always combination of bhavas. Now, these combinations, if we understand and know, then it's very easy to expect what we are going to expect. And thus, understanding each combination of bhavas is very easy.
Okay, I like that. Would you be, is it possible for you to give a specific example? That might be helpful if you can.
We say envy. I'm just giving an example. I don't know whether envy is really a vichari bhava. But suppose we
Okay.
take an example of envy.
Okay.
Then envy is bound by certain restrictions in a very narrow corridor to flow through. But envy is not always associated with only envy. It's associated with many other feelings as well. And these
Mm,
combinations are very common to go by. Like envy has also disappointment inside. And
mm,
disappointment has created envy. So both go together. So
mm.
similarly, if we understand that there are two or three things that generally go together, it's very easy to understand what to expect.
I like that. I like that. I mean, so let's say I'm feeling envious of another devotee, that we both make garlands, but that devotee's garlands are the main ones that get offered. The garlands I make are just used as decoration on the altar, and only that devotee's garlands actually go on the body of the deity. And I'm thinking, gosh, why are they only using their garlands? Right? Or I'm doing some service at the temple, someone else is doing service, but that person, everybody glorifies them and everybody claps for them and nobody even notices what I'm doing. So underneath that might be disappointment. There might be disappointment. And underneath that might be some kind of doubt or insecurity of some kind under there, or some kind of hopelessness under there. And when I look at what's under there, I can be in a much better position to deal with the envy. So thank you. Thank you very much. Is that
Hare
what you
Krishna
meant?
Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Excellent. Asutosh Sarma, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So, Mataji, this is
Right.
what I think. This is the core philosophy of Advaita Vedanta as well. Like, know thyself. One should know
Mm.
who they are. Then,
Mm.
if you know who you are, then you get to the thoughts and the reasoning behind the thoughts, and then you will be able to resolve those thoughts so that it will help you in your journey towards your goal. So, it's a
Mm.
very primary primitive question for one to understand what bhavas are the truest of the bhavas that are acting as the seed for other things to happen to you.
Mm. That's a really nice analysis. And we have one in the chat from Sri Devi Gorangi. It teaches us that emotions are not enemies. I like this. When connected to Krishna, they act like a fuel and not an obstacle. Example, anger in material life could cause destruction, but in spiritual life, for instance, to protect dharma. I like this. However, one should be extremely careful because we can mistakenly label our material emotions as spiritual and excuse ourselves in ways that are actually harmful. So we have to be extremely careful, especially with lust, anger, greed. With those sort of emotions, we have to be extremely, extremely careful that we don't justify behavior saying that, well, these are spiritual emotions. One way we can tell if an emotion is spiritual or material is, are we filled with joy? Are we filled with peace? Are we feel more enlightenment? Because ordinary anger is actually a poison in the body. I mean, literally, it's a poison in the body. It's useful if we have to protect ourselves against a pack of dogs, or somebody's coming in with a gun to shoot our child or something. Then it's actually useful. But if it stays in the body, it poisons us. Anuragini Sudevi says, when come service need to be in proper way, emotion plays a role when we start to explain finally anger, hate, energy, loss. I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. But yes, emotion is very important in our service. It's called devotional service. If we're doing our service without emotion, it's not very effective. Just the physical actions of our service are not really very effective at awakening our love for God if there's no emotions. So some other thoughts I have similar to what some of you have said. So we often just feel what we're feeling at the moment without really understanding it. And understanding what we're feeling in the moment can help in detachment. So again, if I'm feeling envy of somebody, instead of just trying to kill the envy, oh, I shouldn't feel envious. Right? I mean, for myself, if I give a class and 20 people come and then someone else gives a class and 200 people come, I might think, oh, why is that? Why did people like that person's class more than, right? And I can be envious. And if I just think, oh, no, I shouldn't be envious. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. Let me just try to kill the envy. That will not work. At least in my experience, I haven't found that ever works. It just pushes it down and it comes up again. But if I look at, well, what's under that envy? What's under there? What other emotions are under there? Again, is there insecurity? Is there disappointment? Is there self-disparagement? Is there fear? What other things are going on? And then by looking at those things, then and dealing with those things, then the thing that bothered me, the envy or the anger or the grief or whatever was bothering me at the time, can often be dissipated. You're feeling overwhelmed by grief at something, and then, oh, why am I grieving this? Oh, again, maybe there's disappointment, right? Maybe something I expected to happen didn't happen. So how can I look at that? And seeing these things, another thing that I find extremely helpful is seeing my material emotions as perversions of something spiritual, that I don't have to take them seriously and I don't have to hate them. That there's a reality of envy that's enlivening. which is that healthy competition. There's a variety of disappointment that's enlivening. There's a variety of all of these things which are enlivening, and I can move from the material to the spiritual. And we'll talk about that again a little later. Okay. We're going to look at the relationship of the various emotions with the basic relationship. The Staibhav, which again, a synonym for Staibhav is Rati. And in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami uses Rati as much or more than he uses the word Staibhav. So some of these emotions, as already discussed, do not have a direct relationship with the devotee's Rati or basic relationship with Krishna, but they support it for pastime. So this is a picture of a hand supporting a heart. So the Vyavichari bhavs may support the Staibhav or the Rati, but they're not actually, they don't have a direct relationship with it. By the way, when we teach hermeneutics, we also teach how many statements of the Shastra are not universal eternal truths, but they support universal eternal truths. Like Krishna telling Arjuna, stand up and fight. That's not an instruction for everybody at all times in all circumstances, but it supports instructions that are like that. Okay, so what are the kind of relationships can these emotions have with the basic relationship? So some of these emotions, some of these Vyavichari bhavs arrive when there's an obstacle to Rati, when there's an obstacle to the Staibhav, and then they mix with the Rati. Like when there's an offense to Krishna. So Shishupal's offending Krishna, that's not arising, the Vyavichari bhavs are not arising from the devotee's friendship, but they mix with the friendship, but they're coming from an obstacle. They're not coming from the friendship. Some of these emotions, some of these Vyavichari bhavs, such as destruction of ignorance, may appear to cause Rati, but Rati is permanent and not caused. So the Vibhavas, which stimulate the Staibhav, they're not causing the Rati. They're not causing the Staibhav. They're stimulating it. So then there's a mutual action between the permanent Rati, the Staibhav, and the Vyavichari bhav. They're feeding each other. Now here we have a picture of flowers because this is about a fragrance. A fragrance. So the Vyavichari bhavs of apprehension, dizziness, fatigue, laziness, intoxication, and alertness are somewhat the effect of a Rati. In other words, they have kind of a fragrance of a Rati. Okay, types of, so that's kind of the introductory understanding for what we're about to discuss. Types of Vyavichari bhavs, they're called dependent and independent. And I find some of the points here to be particularly interesting when it comes to assumptions that I might be making about what prema bhakti is. Okay, so here we have dependent on Rati, independent of Rati. So Rati again means Staibhav. So superior, born of Rati and nourishes Rati. It comes from the Staibhav, comes out of the Staibhav, and it nourishes the Staibhav. So that's a subcategory of dependent on Rati. Two subcategories of that are, is it dealing with a primary Staibhav or a secondary Staibhav? Again, the primary ones are servitorship, friendship, parental, conjugal neutrality. Indirect are anger, joy, fear, horror, wonder, etc. So if they're born out of a primary Rati, a primary Staibhav, like friendship or servitude, then they're called superior. So that's dependent, superior, direct. If it comes from a secondary Staibhav, such as wonder or compassion, then it's a dependent, superior, indirect. Now, this is where that's pretty clear, but then we have this dependent, inferior. And this is what I find interesting. It's not born of the Staibhav, and it doesn't nourish it either. How interesting. It's not born of the Vaibhav, and it's not nourishing the Vaibhav, but such things exist in prema bhaktis. Okay, then you have independent of rati. I also find this fascinating in terms of what it's like, what prema is like. So this can be that later touches rati. We already talked about this with Yasoda and her dream of Putana. Something that has a fragrance of rati. And here we have the abbases. So if someone just has an abbas of a Vaibhav and they have a Vyavitari bhav, that's called a void. So independent that later touches rati have a fragrance and an abbas of rati. Okay, first we're going to look at the dependent. So this is this part of the diagram. Superior, born of rati and nourishes rati, from the 5 primary relationships, from the 7 secondary relationship. And then it depends on rati. It is dependent on the rati, but it's not born of it or nourishes it. And again, I think this is interesting from the point of view of understanding prema and understanding something of what does it mean to be in love with Krishna? What does it mean to be in this spiritual world? That the varieties and the permutations may be very different from what we expect. Okay, here's the kind of thing that we would expect: the dependent, superior, direct. So it's born from and controlled by a primary Vaibhav, such as friendship. It comes from the friendship, it's controlled by that friendship, it nourishes that friendship. That's direct, dependent on the rati, superior because it comes from and nourishes, and direct is the 5 primary. Here's an example. What is the use of eyes which do not see Mathura, hearing whose name my hairs stand on end? Srila Jiva Goswami's commentary. The desire to see Mathura is an expression of a genuine principle rati for the Lord. And it could be any of them. The Vyavichari bhav of nirveda, self-depreciation, nourishes the rati directly. So this kind of self-depreciation, what's the use of my eyes that do not see Mathura? This comes from the rati. It could come from any of the primary ratis. And it also nourishes the rati. Comes from it and nourishes it. Okay, here we have an example of dependent. It's dependent on the rati. It's superior. It comes from the rati and nourishes the rati. But here, indirect, it's controlled by secondary Vaibhavs like wonder, joy, fear, etc. Here's an example of that. I am Bhima. How unfortunate are my 2 arms, strong as iron beams, if they cannot crush the evil Shishupal, the enemy of Krishna. So this is self-depreciation. It's under the control of the secondary rati, secondary Vaibhav of anger. So it's called indirect. It's not coming from his friendship or nourishing his friendship. It's coming from his anger and nourishing his anger. So the self-depreciation is coming from and nourishing his anger. And again, this is not material anger. It's a secondary Vaibhav. Okay, now we're looking at the dependent inferior. They don't arise from either a primary or secondary Vaibhav. They don't nourish a primary Vaibhav like friendship. They don't nourish a secondary Vaibhav like compassion. And here the example is given of Arjuna. So he sees the universal form cursing everyone. No, so it's dependent because Arjuna has a primary Vaibhav. He has one. And his fear comes from the Vyavichari of confusion. It's not a secondary Vaibhav because Arjuna is afraid for the world, not for Krishna. So it's if you're scared for Krishna, oh, Krishna's in Kaliya, that's a secondary Vaibhav because your Vishaya is Krishna. Here, his Vishaya is the world. So it doesn't come from either. But in general, he has rati. But this fear and this confusion is not nourishing his friendship with Krishna. Now, this one I find really fascinating. So I find this one fascinating, that devotees can have Vyavichari bhavs that don't come from or nourish their rati, but they can have them. It's part of their whole holistic experience. And I also find there's two categories of independent Vyavichari bhavs that are also existing in pure devotees. One kind doesn't, two kinds do. And the examples given, like a king's servant who's always dependent on the king, but they also have their own life. And this also I found fascinating. Pure devotees in prema, they always have that prema all the time, and yet they may have some things that are only somewhat related to their prema. I just find that absolutely fascinating. And here we have these three categories. Now, this one would not be for pure devotees. This is those who have an abas of a staibhav. But for these people, they actually have a staibhav with Krishna, and their Vyavichari bhav starts from something unrelated to Krishna and later touches their staibhav, or it's somewhat indirectly, it has a fragrance of that. So again, we can look at this. So without genuine rati, so rati sunya in impure devotees with chaya rati means a shadow. They have a shadow or a reflection of a staibhav. And so they experience some Vyavichari bhavs, but those Vyavichari bhavs are independent of rati because the person doesn't have real rati. Now, here, a person who has real rati, it's influenced by it. Rati anu sparshana. Sparshana means to touch, anu means to follow. So it later touches, anu, later. So it later touches their rati. And then rati ganda, a fragrance. So these devotees have real rati, and their Vyavichari bhav it has a fragrance of their rati. Okay, let's look at the lowest one first. Without genuine rati, this is equivalent to rati abas bhava, sattvika abas. Very technical terms. I don't expect you all to remember that, but if you do, that's cool. Generated by rati abas. This is the most independent, and abas is a shadow or a reflection. And I was so chuffed that I found this picture that shows people having a simultaneous shadow or reflection, because an abas can be characterized as either. There is a slight difference between a shadow abas and a reflection abas, but we are not getting into that. So without genuine rati, so these persons don't have pure rati, they don't have a pure staibhav, but they're not inimical. This is not inimical. Inimical is something else. These are not demons. So here we have an example. The brahmanas who were performing sacrifices, who condemned themselves, displayed the Vyavichari bhav of disappointment, but they had a shadow of rati. So this was born from realization of their fallen nature, but it didn't touch any devotion. Okay, now look at this one, independent, influenced by genuine rati. This is equivalent to the digda sattvika bhavs. So here it's a Vyavichari bhav, not a sattvika bhav, but it's the same principle. So there's genuine rati, and the emotion later touches rati. So this is an emotion that's not caused by rati in a person who has genuine rati. So an example, when the bull demon attacked the devotees, the devotees began to cry out, "Dear Krishna, please save us. We are now gone." I need to put a comma in this slide. The Vraja devotees always have rati, but this fear was not for Krishna's safety. It was for their own safety. Okay, so it was influenced, and then it later touches rati. So first it's, oh, I'm scared for myself. And then they go to Krishna. Okay, having a trace of rati, this is a fragrance. The word is ganda. So in a devotee with genuine rati, the Vyavichari bhav, it only indirectly comes from rati or nourishing rati. It comes from rati or nourishing rati indirectly as a fragrance, And here's an example of independent rati, has a trace of rati, a fragrance of rati. Radha quickly hung her head and covered her face with the edge of her cloth to hide her shame when Mukara pointed out her yellow cloth that came from Krishna. Radha's rati was the cause of her having the yellow cloth, but the shame came from Mukara's statement and only slightly from her rati. So this is a ganda, or a fragrance of rati. So what I'm going to want you to do in this breakout group is discuss the emotional life of pure devotees. If you could have some discussion of what we just talked about, how is this possible, How is it possible that even pure devotees, they have things with just a fragrance of rati, they have things that start out not being connected to their staibhav, that later touch their staibhav. How are all these varieties possible? And what does that mean in terms of our understanding of Krishna consciousness, our understanding of our development of Krishna consciousness? Okay, we're going to have 10 minutes. Hare Krishna. So now we're going to look at the semblance of these staibhavs. So the semblance means, again, a shadow or reflection of it. So first we have unfavorable. So this is different, again, from the independent, the most independent, where people don't have a rati with Krishna. They experience a vyabhichari bhav, but they don't have a rati with Krishna, but they're not inimical. So this is people who are inimical to Krishna. And then there's inappropriate. So that's pratikulyam is the unfavorable, and the anauchityam. Chitya is to imagine. So you're imagining something that's not there for somebody else. Okay, so here's a semblance of unfavorable, pratikulyam. So this is similar to pradipa sattvika bhava. So this is the sattvika bhavs, remember, in the enemies. So these are vyabhichari bhavs in the enemies. So it looks like Kamsa has a vyabhichari bhav, but actually it's only a semblance. So they appear like emotions related to Krishna because these emotions happen in somebody that has something to do with Krishna. They have something to do with Krishna, but they have no rati. There's no awakened staibhav in them at all. And this is here's an example of unfavorable pratikulyam. So when the Keshi demon was assassinated by Krishna, assassinate is an interesting word here, Kamsa became hopeless. So this hopelessness is the vyabhichari bhav, but it's a pratikulyam. It's not in relationship to Krishna. It's a material vyabhichari bhav, even though Kamsa is experiencing this in something related to Krishna. It's not related to love of Krishna. Kamsa telling Akur he is foolish for thinking Krishna is the supreme Lord. So this attitude that Kamsa has, again, it's not related to love of Krishna. So we shouldn't think that when the demons have these, that is a genuine vyabhichari bhav. Okay, something inappropriate or non-existence. So attributing or projecting ecstatic emotions to inanimate objects or plants. So here's an example. A devotee who tried to console a kadamba tree, thinking that the tree was lamenting because Krishna hasn't touched its shadow. Actually, Krishna does touch all the plants every day. But the devotee was thinking, oh, you must be in lamentation. So another example, distributing ecstatic emotions to animals. So first was inanimate objects or plants, a table or a kadamba tree. Here we're going to look at animals, something beyond their capacity or different to what the animals are actually feeling. So here we have an example, a description of a bird feeling pride. So, oh, you peacocks, you must be feeling pride. because Krishna is wearing your feather. So the question arises, are there emotions in the plants and animals and the objects in the spiritual world? So Krishna says in 11:12:8, Bhagavatam, the inhabitants of Vrindavana, including the gopis, cows, unmoving creatures, such as the twin Arjuna trees, animals, living entities with stunted consciousness, such as bushes and thickets, and snakes, such as Kalia, all achieve the perfection of life by unalloyed love for me, and thus they very easily achieve me. It's my daughter bringing my breakfast here. Okay. So Srila Jiva Goswami has a commentary here. And by the way, this would apply to objects like tables because everything is fully conscious. So Srila Jiva Goswami writes, although they have awareness as if they were human, that will disappear in them in order to conceal from them the confidential pastimes. In some places, they are described as having emotions, but this should be taken as only a general form, not with discriminating powers. So to keep in mind that the objects, the plants, the animals in the spiritual world are in Shantaras. They are in the rasa of neutrality, and that's the rasa they want to be in. They want to be in this Shantaras, which means they want to be in a situation where there's not a lot of strong emotions. Shantaras is the peaceful ras. So they want to be peaceful. And so they have different emotions, but not the kind that those in other rasas have, because they don't want them. But those who have human-like forms may attribute human-like emotions to the objects, the plants, and the animals. And when they do so, this is a semblance of a Vyavichari Bhav. So these specific emotions that they're attributing, they're projecting onto the animal or tree or the chair. So anuchityam, anauchityam Vyavichari Bhavs, or when the animal or tree may be experiencing some kind of ecstatic love for Krishna, but not the emotion that the devotee perceives. So we're going to have a breakout room to talk about the ecstasy of the objects, plants, and animals. So we're having a discussion, 10-minute again. Let me just look at this for a minute. Okay. So just as a discussion of the ecstasies of the objects, the plants, and the animals. Now we're going to look at the conditions and stages of Vyavichari Bhavs, which is also related to, again, our emotions in this world. So it's when the emotion starts and when it ends. So the generation is when it starts. Satisfaction is if it's a disturbing emotion when it ends. Then conjunction is when two or more emotions unite. Aggregation is when there's a conflict between them or one emotion covers another emotion. Again, this is nice also for meditating on the spiritual, but also for understanding and getting detached from the material. So generation means the initial manifestation of the Vyavichari Bhavs. Every emotion has some generation. It starts at some point. Remember, these are not sthai bhavs. Sthai bhavs or rati are always there. Prabhupada calls it continuous ecstasy. The Vyavichari bhavs are coming and going. They're coming and going. So here's an example of joy. The beginning of joy, when the sun turned red and Yasoda heard the sound of the flute close by, her bodice became damp with the flow of milk out of joy. So here we have the Vyavichari Bhav of joy. We have the Sattvika Bhav of milk coming from her breasts. And it starts when the sun turns red. It's the sunset. Krishna's coming home. And she hears the flute. So here's an example of envy. When Krishna was joking with Radharani in relation to another girl, Radharani moved her beautiful eyebrows crossly. So the generation is Krishna's joking, and the Vyavichari Bhav is envy, and we have an Anubhav of moving her beautiful eyebrows. Now, conjunction, when they come together. So the mixture of two versions of the same emotion from the same cause, or from different causes, or two differing emotions from the same cause or different cause. So we're going to have one cause for two similar emotions, one cause for two different emotions, two causes for two similar emotions, two causes for two different emotions. What a science, huh? So here's inertness from favorable and unfavorable. So Yasoda feeling inertness upon seeing that the Putana demon had been killed, which was auspicious, but that Krishna was playing on her breast was inauspicious. So she had the Vyavichari bhavs of inertness from two different causes. Here we have differing emotions from one source. This child is very fickle. He constantly runs inside and outside of Gokula. His fearlessness causes me both joy, harsha, and apprehension, shanka. So here we have joy and fear or apprehension, which are different, right? You could say they're in opposition, but they're both from the same cause of Krishna running around. So Krishna running around is causing joy, and Krishna running around is causing apprehension simultaneously. And of course, we experience this materially, that we can have two different emotions from the same cause. Here we have a conjunction of different emotions from different causes. So seeing her son with joyful eyes in front of her, and seeing the strong wrestlers as well, Devaki began to feel jubilation and lamentation. So seeing her son, right? She hadn't seen her son for a long time when he was in Vrindavan, and she's now Devaki and Vasudev. Here's Devaki and Vasudev in this painting. They're out of jail and they're coming to the wrestling arena. So they're so happy to finally see their son, but they see the wrestlers who might kill their son. And so they're lamenting. So they're happy and sad at the same time from two different things. One thing making them happy, one thing making them sad. And these two things are coexisting at the same time. So here's many emotions from one cause. So here we have the Vyavichari bhavs of joy, impatience, pride, indignation, and displeasure. Srimati Radharani was standing on the bank of the Jamuna, and she was attacked by Krishna. Although she externally expressed a disturbed mood from this incident, within her she was smiling and feeling great satisfaction. So she was showing external displeasure, internal pleasure. She was experiencing joy, impatience, pride, indignation, and displeasure all at the same time, all from Krishna coming. When we say attacking her, he probably came up and gave her a hug or something like that. That's what we mean by this. So she was feeling this one cause of Krishna coming to her, had her experience many emotions. Here we have many emotions from many causes. So here we have shame, envy, joy, and despair. So Srimati Radharani, she was wearing a necklace given by Krishna. That's one cause. She sees her mother nearby. It's another cause. In front of her, smiling Padma. Padma is the associate of Chandravali, her rival. So that's a third cause. At a distance, she sees Krishna and her husband Abhimanyu. So all these different causes, and some of these things are causing her shame, right? She's ashamed that in front of her husband and in front of her mother, she's wearing a necklace gave by Krishna. Envy to see Padma smiling, joy when she sees Krishna, and despair when she sees Abhimanyu. So, and all of these things are existing at the same time. She's feeling shame, envy, joy, and despair all at the same time from many different causes. What a rich emotional life. Now, instead of happening simultaneously, we're looking at aggregation and supplanting. So this is one emotion is leaving and another one is taking it over. So they're not happening fully at the same time. They're not happening fully at the same time. So joy is leaving, sadness is coming, but there's still a little joy when the sadness comes. Okay. So here's an example of pride, despair, humility, consideration, remembrance, apprehension, indignation, and terror. Now, this is an example of Kamsa. So this is a semblance of Vyavichari Bhav, not a real Vyavichari Bhav. Kamsa says, what can that child do? Yet he has killed all of my friends. Should I then surrender to him? A warrior can never do that. So you can see each of these happening. So what can that child do? Is pride. Yet he has killed all of my friends. Is despair. Should I then surrender to him? That's humility. A warrior can never do that. That's consideration. I'm preparing huge wrestlers to fight him. That's consideration. But he has lifted Govardhan with his hand. That's remembrance. Should I go to Raja and attack him? He has lifted Govardhan with his hand is also indignation, apprehension. I should go today to Raja and attack him, but my heart is shaking because of him is terror. So he's having these one after another. He's not having them all at the same time. So he has some pride when there's still a little bit of pride. As pride is leaving, despair comes. As despair is leaving, humility comes. As humility is leaving, so there's some mixing, but they're not all equal weight at the same time. So here's another example of disappointment, pride, apprehension, steadiness, despair, contemplation, and impatience. I am so wretched that these two eyes never see Mathura, disappointment. I am nicely educated, pride, but my education has simply been used in government service. I have not considered formidable time, apprehension. To whom shall I leave all my wealth and fortune? I am becoming older and older. We have contemplation, steadiness, despair. Shall I execute devotional service from here at home? Contemplation. My mind is being attracted by the transcendental land of Vrindavan is impatience. Now, this appears to be indecision. Should I stay home? Should I go to Vrindavan? This is not the kind of indecision described in Madhurya Kadambini of the unsteady devotee. So indecision is a primary symptom of unsteady bhajana kriya. Should I marry? Should I not get married? Should I live in the temple? Should I get a job? And of the unsteady devotee, this indecision means that the person is thinking that their external situation is the primary cause of their bhakti. So that's not what's going on here. Here we're talking about a pure devotee who has a sthai-bhav, a basic relationship with Krishna, and who's experiencing all these vyavichari bhavs, one after another, one after another, one after another, due to ecstasy. Then there's satisfaction. So when the emotion, especially a disturbing emotion, when it goes away. So here's an example. Satisfaction at the end of despair. The cowherd boys could not see Krishna after searching for Krishna in the forest. Hearing the sound of his flute, they became filled with joy, and their despair vanished. So when the Vyavichari Bhav vanishes. Now, when it vanishes, it does not leave a trace. And we'll remember that when we study about the secondary sthai bhavs. So a summary of the Vyavichari bhavs. So Srila Rupa Goswami says that this so much detail, but he says it's insufficient. He said, though my words do not have variety in meaning or flavor, examples of the Vyavichari bhavs have been presented to indicate their essential nature as much as possible. So all the emotions of love. You've got the devotee's main basic relationship, say a friendship, then the 7 secondary basic relationships with the devotee, any devotee generally. Ghastliness is usually only for neutrality, but generally the devotee can, along with their main basic relationship, they can also experience the 7 secondary relationships, plus the 33 Vyavichari bhavs equals 41 varieties of emotion. So the main relationship the devotee has is natural and pervasive for that devotee. So interplay of bhavas, these create the 41 variety of emotions, create the voluntary and involuntary expressions. So here is a chart. I know we've had different charts showing different things in different ways. So here we have the stimulants, Krishna, his devotees, and various things. They shake up the dominant primary basic relationship, which interacts with the secondary basic relationships and the emotions, giving rise to voluntary expressions and involuntary expressions. That creates a taste or a pleasure. So the vibhava stimulates the dominant primary sthai. We'll see the sthai can also be mixed, which interacts with the secondary sthai and the vyavichari bhavs to produce the anubhavs and the sattvika bhavs, and this produces rasa. Okay, so what is bhava? A definition is the modification of the senses and body caused due to the vibhavas are known as bhava. So some bhavas are swabhavika, innate, and some are agantuka, or induced. This is an important point. It's a point that Prabhupada touches on in the Nectar devotion. I actually spent quite a lot of time consulting with a lot of scholars on this point. It's very relevant to the nature of the soul. Now, by the way, there are persons who have mixed Sai Bhava. They're like a mixture of friendship and servitude, but there's always one that's dominant. So there's one that's innate and pervasive. So the Swabhavika, the innate bhavas, exist completely and thoroughly inside and outside the body. They pervade the entirety of the being, just as redness is innately pervading inside and outside the root of the manjista, the Indian matter. By the way, the word red and the word love are the same word in Sanskrit, which is used in this Sanskrit verse. The word is raga. So again, there are people who have a mixed bhav. So are people who have, say, friendship and parental, like the older cowherd boys. In that case, one of them is natural, innate, and pervasive, and the other one acts like a vyavichari bhav that comes and goes. So they may have a general feeling of friendship that's innate, and the parental comes and goes as if it was a vyavichari bhav. So bhava refers to the general category of love, and rati refers to its 5 specific forms. I'm just showing 4 here. Neutrality is not shown in these pictures. Although this rati is generally one, it manifests as many, friendship, parental, etc., due to the different types of bhakti in individuals. So the devotee's internal emotion of love and attachment is also expressed externally just by a slight contact with its cause, vibhava, Krishna. So it's always there, but when it has some touch with vibhava, it becomes expressed and relished. So again, the innate bhava is the one dominant sthai bhav. So if these bhavas are innate, how can vibhavas become their cause? So Srila Jiva Goswami says, vibhavas are known as the cause only for namesake because they have some minimum contact with the mukhya bhavas. Mukhya means the primary sthai bhav. Mukhya means face or chief. So the vibhavas are not causing the sthai bhav. They're not causing it. They're stimulating it, but they're not causing it. It's already there. It's always there. So important, my dear friends. So important. It's another devotee as ashraya cannot cause your sthai bhav. They can stimulate it. They can't cause it. Our sthai bhav is our sthai bhav forever, forever without beginning. Our choice of sthai bhav. Yes. All right. So love is fixed. It's different from incidental emotions. So unlike the previous example here, innate love is compared to so it's a different example. Before the other example was that innate love was something that's always red. So here's a different example. If we say that our innate love is like a colorless cloth and incidental emotions color and dye it. So the incidental emotions are externally induced by the vibhavas that act as causative agents. So Nectar Devotion Prabhupada writes, as clothing tinged red appears red, so the temporary appearance of a certain type of feeling can be detected or observed by the specific ecstatic symptom, because there'll be an ecstatic symptom of an anubhav or a sattvika bhav. So the vyavichari bhavs are like some temporary dye on a cloth. They're not the actual color of the cloth. So here we have these analogies. So swa bhavika, innate bhavas, manifest in 5 kinds of rati, 5 kinds of sthai, and they pervade the entirety of the being, just as redness is innately pervading inside and outside the root of the manjista. But agantuka, induced bhavas, act on rati like the externally induced redness of a white cloth using dyes. Of course, the difference is that this is temporary. Okay, the next section we're going to look at is wow, we could spend a week just on this. So, we're going through this quickly. I think if you can just get the main idea that our innate nature, our innate strength, our innate, at this point in our bhakti, our degree of love for Krishna is going to affect how we experience Vyavichari Bhavs and how we display them. That's the main idea of this section. So devotees with different primary basic relationships, servitude, friendship, etc., manifest the emotions differently in terms of the emotions and the degree of intensity. So the emotions within a devotee, the Vyavichari Bhavs, become manifest to others in the form of anubhavs and sattvika bhavs. So how can we tell someone's experiencing a Vyavichari Bhav? Because there'll be anubhavs and sattvika bhavs. This is true materially as well. And others can perceive them. So some devotees can more easily conceal their anubhavs and sattvika bhavs from others, and so others may not be able to tell what they're feeling. So we have 2 types, 3 analogies each of dispositions in terms of the perception of others of a devotee's internal emotions. So where ordinary people cannot perceive the devotee's internal emotions, and this is because the devotees are not yet pure. So there's little or no external transformations of body and senses. So this are for sadhakas whose Sai Bhav has awakened, but they're still mixed. And they're compared to heavy, deep, and expansive. Now here we have where people can perceive the devotee's internal emotions caused by a pure devotion, where there'll be extreme transformations of body or senses, and this is compared to light, as in weight, surface, and small. Okay, heavy or light. Our consciousness can be heavy like gold. These are all different poetic metaphors. Our consciousness can be heavy like gold due to impurities, or light like cotton due to purity. And emotions like the wind that easily move cotton and don't easily move gold. Deep or spread on the surface. So our consciousness can be deep like the ocean due to impurities, spread on the surface like a pond due to purity, and emotions like high mountains. So the mountains are much more visible with a pond than an ocean. Expansive or small, expansive like a city due to impurities, small like a hut due to purity, and emotions like an elephant An elephant's not very obvious in a big city, at least in those days. A lamp is not that visible in a big city. An elephant or a lamp is very visible in a hut. Though there's also two types of dispositions, another way of looking at a similar thing. But there we're looking at how much we can experience it. So what we just looked at is how much you can tell what someone else is experiencing. If their heart is like gold, if their heart is like cotton, if their heart is like an ocean, if their heart is like a pond, like that, if their heart is like a city, if their heart is like a hut, how well can you tell what they're feeling? This is to what extent we are going to feel Vyavichari bhavs. So here we have hard, three kinds of hardness: lightning, gold, and lack. So if our heart is like lightning, then we're hostile to Krishna. We've done too many austerities. If our heart is like gold, then we have equal hostility and affection for Krishna. If it's like lack, then we have slight hostility to Krishna and mostly love for Krishna. And these emotions are like fire. So fire can easily melt lack, with difficulty melt gold, and it can't melt lightning at all. Those are degrees of hard-heartedness, degrees of soft-heartedness. So this is when the sthai bhav is strong. So the least soft is like beeswax. Medium soft is like butter. And the advanced devotee is soft like nectar. And here the emotions are not just like fire, they're like the heat of the sun. Nectar is always melted. Butter easily melts in the sun. Beeswax takes some time to melt in the sun. So here we have, it can be combined. Our internal hardness or softness can combine with heavy, light, deep, shallow, expansive, or small. And those combinations result into to what degree we feel the Vyavichari bhavs, and to what degree others can tell that we are experiencing the Vyavichari bhavs. Now, as we go through sadhana bhakti, our basic relationship, our sthai bhav, strengthens, and our animosity towards Krishna decreases, and then all of hearts become very disturbed by the Vyavichari bhavs. Okay, so devotees can naturally hide their loving emotions. They may limit the display of their unlimited good qualities, but the Lord lives in the ocean of their hearts, and at full tide, symptoms cannot be hidden. So we discussed this, you discussed this in a breakout room for the sattvika bhavs, why sometimes devotees would want to hide their sattvika bhavs, and why sometimes they can't be hidden. So this is the same. The sattvika bhavs, the anubhavs, are displays, external displays of the sthai bhav and the vyavichari bhavs, according to the degree of maturity of our sthai bhav, we are affected. The degree of maturity and purity of our sthai bhav, we are affected by the vyavichari bhavs, and we will display them to others. Okay, so general discussion. I want to talk about what this section may teach us about understanding other emotions and our own emotions. So we have something in the chat here, is that moderately advanced devotees refer to Majjhima Adhikari and advanced devotees refer to Uttamakari. Yes, you could say that, but keep in mind that Majjhima and Uttama are defined differently in different places, because Majjhima just means intermediate and Uttama means advanced. So you can be Majjhima and Uttama in different respects. I would say here that moderately advanced devotees, we're talking about people who have realized their sthai bhav to some extent, but they're still sadhakas. And the most advanced are those in prema bhakti, with bhava being considered, you could consider bhava part of Majjhima or part of Uttama, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, any general discussions about how this section helps us to understand the emotions of others, other spiritual emotions, and how it helps us in developing our own spiritual emotions. Any thoughts?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I was just thinking of something kind of selfish, I guess. If we can, I guess, identify these in a devotee, doesn't that allow us to become more, uh, we'll be able to know who to associate with?
Yeah, that's not selfish.
Oh, okay.
It's not selfish at all. We are ordered to associate with devotees, and we are ordered to associate with the devotees according to their advancement relative to our own, how we associate with them. So it helps if we have some ability to discern that. As I said the other day, I don't think we can discern that 100%. If the residents of Vrindavan can be fooled by demons dressed as devotees, I think the idea that we're going to be able to figure that out 100% is ridiculous. But we need to have some ability to discern it. Otherwise, we can't follow the instructions of our acharyas.
And also maybe to also protect ourselves also. I mean, the
Yes.
opposite side of that, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so Nardarishi wrote in the chat, it helps us not to judge or to look deeper, to understand ourselves and others. Okay, very good. Other thoughts? Anurangani Sudevi says, when we read the pastimes, we could identify all this emotion. Yes, nice. Personal, we can find it in the emotion, how it plays in us personally. Very nice. We could have a whole little book about just this one section of, of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with the city and the hut and the elephant and the ocean. Now, one thing that I have learned rather late in my Bhakti Yoga journey is that it's very important for us to be able to recognize and detach from our material emotions and not to take them so seriously. And, often what we do is we take our material emotions very seriously and act on them, or we take them very seriously and try to kill them. Neither one of those tactics is spiritually helpful, or I could say materially helpful. One is attachment and one is aversion. So attachment is whatever I feel, I just act on it. That's attachment. Aversion, whatever I feel, I'm trying to kill it. So that's aversion. And I bring this up quite a lot because I think it needs to be said often. So in Bhagavad Gita 2:62-63, Krishna talks about contemplating the objects of the senses, developing attachment, then developing lust. Lust just means extreme attachment. It doesn't necessarily mean sexual. It means that I'm so attached that I don't care about the consequences of my attachment. Then anger because lust is innately frustrating. We either don't get what we lusted after, or we get it and it disappoints us, or we get it and it's temporary. And ultimately we become angry, and that anger leads to, we forget, we lose our memory, we forget everything we've learned spiritually, we lose our intelligence, we fall into materialistic life. But the problem is that as conditioned souls, we're experiencing this kind of thing all the time. And then Krishna says in 264 that the solution is to become free from attachment and aversion, to regulate our senses, and then we get the mercy of the Lord. So the mercy of the Lord is absolutely required. We cannot, right? Devi esha gunamayi mama maya daratya mam evaye prapajante mayam epatam tarantite. We can only get free of Maya by Krishna's mercy, and we're going to attract his mercy by how we deal with our body. I think that's well known in our Hare Krishna movement. We should regulate our senses, only eat prasadam, and so forth. But the other one seems to not be so much known, that we need to be free from attachment and aversion. In order to be free from attachment and aversion mentally, we have to be able to recognize our thoughts and feelings our material thoughts and feelings as not me, that they are products of the mind, they are products of the modes of nature, they are not me. And to be able to see them with detachment. And this whole discussion of Vyavichari Bhavs is very, very useful for doing that materially. That we can see, oh, here there's frustration, there's disappointment, there's self-depreciation, there's aggravation, there's all these different things flowing through my body and mind. But I don't need to do the anubhavs. I don't need to express them. You know, saying that the anubhavs give relief to emotions, but I don't need to do that for the material emotions. I can just simply observe them and let them pass, because all these emotions will pass on their own. I don't need to try to kill them, nor do I need to express them. But there's something I can do, and this is, I think, brought up here by Sonia Raman. In order to experience this kind of emotion, we have to get completely purified without having any contamination. Well, but that's not true. No. Because if that were true, we wouldn't have had the section we just went through. So the section we just went through, let's go back and look at it. Okay, so here is a situation where a devotee is not completely pure, right? Thunderbolt, they're just a materialist, they hate Krishna. So gold, they have an equal amount of purification and non-purification. There's not full purification here. It's equal pure and impure. Then the heart is like gold. And if there's a little impurity, then it's like lack. And emotions are like fire. So fire is going to affect gold, even if it's only half pure. It's certainly going to affect lack, which still has some impurity. And then we come to this stage where the basic relationship is strong. The Staibhav is strong. But still, it's only the nectar stage that's the fully prema bhakta. So a devotee in this stage, like a Shakti, might have beeswax, or maybe even ruchi. Their hostility for Krishna is almost gone, but their Staibhav is not pure. So we still have that the heat of the sun is going to affect beeswax and butter for sure, even though there's still some impurity. So the answer to your question is no, that is not correct. We are going to be affected by genuine Vyavichari Bhavs and genuine Anubhavs and Sattvika Bhavs, even though we're not pure. It's one of the reasons that Srila Rupa Goswami is giving this discussion. I mean, let's think of this materially. So let's say you're learning how to play a musical instrument. You're not yet expert. But yet you can experience emotions while playing the instrument, even though you're learning. Now, when you're just first learning and your instrument is just making ugly sounds, you're not going to experience many emotions other than frustration. You know, I don't think there's not going to be much rasa there. But once you get even a little expertise, you know, my daughter teaches Bharatanatyam dance, and she has her beginning students get up and dance, and you know, they can't get up the first week or the first month, but once they get a tiny bit of expertise, both they and the audience is experiencing some rasa. Okay, I'm going to go to something wonderful, amazing, incredible that is really only available to us bhakti yogis. Woo! So the impersonalists and the Mayavadis, they can become detached from their thoughts and feelings, like I was just talking about. They can see this is not me and be detached, but then they're left with no feelings. One thing we can do, we can identify what we're feeling, then find the equivalent spiritual feeling and meditate on a devotee. Don't meditate on a demon, please. Don't meditate on Kamsa. But because devotees will sometimes do that. No. Find a pure devotee and meditate on them and how they're feeling. And when you do that, and we're going to be explaining this later this week. Ta-da! If you keep coming to classes for the rest of this week, we will also be discussing this. How Srila Rupa Goswami says that when we meditate on the emotions of a pure devotee, we can experience their emotions to some extent. And Prabhupada says if we can have the experience of the residents of Vrindavan to a minute degree, we are successful. So if you're feeling lonely because someone you love is away, instead of just becoming detached from that, oh, okay, this is a material emotion, I can wait till it passes, you can think, well, how did the gopis feel when Krishna was in Mathura? How did Rohini feel when Vasudeva was in Mathura? How did Kunti feel when her husband died? So you can meditate on these feelings, equivalent feelings of the pure devotee, and then you will find that those equivalent feelings, those genuine Vyavichari bhavs, start to fill you, and your material Vyavichari bhavs just become like nothing in comparison. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? And we have just a few kind of odds and ends to look at. So this is a little addendum. Now this is actually in a different part of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is in the Saibhav part 128. But Srila Jiva Goswami says this verse has been written here as it is remembered at this point, though it should be included at the end of the topic of Vyavichari Bhav, since this belongs to the same topic. So, they weren't using word processors, they were writing on leaves. And so sometimes it wasn't easy to move things around. So Srila Jiva Goswami says Srila Rupa Goswami thought of this point here, but actually at 25128, but actually it belongs here in the Vyavichari Bhav section in the fourth wave. Okay. And this is the fact that devotees have love for their associates who have a similar mood. This is the Ashraya category, which nourishes their rati towards Krishna. Those feelings are Vyavichari bhavs. So the feelings that the devotee has for Krishna are Staibhav. The feelings the devotee has for their Ashraya are Vyavichari bhavs. Now, some devotees have more love for the Ashraya than the Vishaya. There are some devotees that have more love for Srimati Radharani than for Krishna. So for those devotees, or more love for Subal than for Krishna, for those devotees, that love toward the Ashraya has a special category that's called Bhavo Lasa Rati. So it's just a little note. For most devotees, their Rati towards Krishna is greater. Okay. We have 2 minutes. If there's anything else anyone wants to bring up, we have a couple things in the chat. When we read pastimes, we can identify all these emotions. Yes, we found that. Okay, no, I already read that. How to transform our material emotions to one of the spiritual emotions. Meditate on the devotees who have a similar emotion. That's how you do it. How do we not act on our material emotions? See them as not you. See them as interplay of the modes and the mind, and observe them. Step back. It takes practice. It can be done. Some people like to imagine their material emotions as like little creatures. There's Mr. Sadness, there's middle aggravation, Mr. Aggravation. But ultimately, we can meditate on these spiritual emotions and transform them. Asutosh Sharma.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Mataji, my dad told me about Gopal Champu because we were talking about Srila Rup Goswami Maharaj and Nectar of Devotion. So he mentioned about Gopal Champu, which is a creation, I believe, from Srila Jiva Goswami. So how is that different? And yeah. So how is
Gopal
that?
Champu is basically, and the Nanda Vrindavan Champu by Kavi Khanapur are a different description of the 10th canto pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. Those books are not an analysis of rasa. So Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a scientific analysis of rasa, I don't know any other book that's quite like that. Gopal Champu by Srila Jiva Goswami and Ananda Vrindavan Champu of Kavi Karnapur are their perspective on the 10th canto pastimes. Basically, that's what they are. Brihad Bhagavatamrita by Srila Sanatana Goswami is a story of a person's gradual progress from material life to Sakya Bhav, Krishna Prem in Goloka Vrindavan.
What is the name, Mataji, for that, the last one you
That's
mentioned?
Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Brihad Bhagavatamrita was translated by Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu and published by the BBT. Gopal Champu and Ananda Vrindavan Champu have been translated by Bhanu Swami. I think Ananda Vrindavan Champu also by Mahanidhi Swami, but they haven't been published by BBT. They are widely available though. Narada Rishi, and then we need to end.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. When we were in the third wave, in chapter 28, we're talking about the sattva, the transformation in the heart in relationship to the sattvic bhavas. This is also a temporary thing that happens, it stays. What's the relationship with the sthai bhava? I'm a little unclear. Is that
Okay,
something-
good. Nice question. Nice question. So you have the sthai bhav, which is always there, and stimulated by the vibhavs and the vyavichari bhavs creates a state of sattva in the heart, which manifests as anubhavs and sattvika bhavs. Now, for those who are fully pure devotees, these things are all happening all the time. So different vibhavas and different vyavichari bhavas and secondary sthai bhavas are mixing with the sthai bhav and creating sattva all the time, but that's different flavors because it's coming out differently in different anubhavas and sattvika bhavas. For someone who's a practicing devotee, that's going to be happening to a much lesser extent and not constantly.
Like they're evolving or aggregating, that kind of thing?
Yes, yes. So so for a sadhaka or someone who's not fully pure, but who's has some realization of the sthai bhav, that situation is going to happen from time to time to a lesser degree. Is that right? Okay, very nice. So the next 3 days, we're going to be discussing the sthai bhav, and then Monday, we're going to do a summary. Krishna willing. So thank you very much. Anything good here is from Srila Prabhupada, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami, all our acharyas in the Shastra. Anything wrong here is my own error. Please either correct or ignore my mistakes and take the good. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.